You know, as something of a zealot myself, I think I'm well placed to spot a fellow fanatic, but there's something about these Just Stop Oil lot that just seem actively malevolent. And I don't know about you, but there stirred in me a visceral physical reaction of shock and disgust when I first read about Stonehenge's desecration this week. A boiling of the blood, which only rose upon seeing the video footage soon after. I mean, is literally nothing sacred anymore? The two soap dodgers involved in the incident were apparently someone called Neve Lynch and Rajan Naidu, a 21-year-old androgynous schoolboy slash schoolgirl, and a 73-year-old coffin dodger who quite frankly should bloody know better. Anyway, here's a clip of their reasonings and supposed demands.
My name's Neve, I'm 21 and I'm a student at the University of Oxford. Today I'm taking action with Just Stop Oil to demand that the UK government commits to signing the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and promises to stop burning fossil fuels by 2030. To refuse to do so is to warrant death, destruction and suffering on an absolutely immense and immeasurable scale. Today we'll be taking action at Stonehenge the day before the solstice. For thousands of years people have come to Stonehenge on the solstice to celebrate our natural world, to celebrate the beauty of our natural world. But I can't help thinking, what does it look like today and what the heck have we done to it? These stones have stood here for 5,000 years. What will the world look like in 5,000 years' time? What will our legacy be? It's becoming ever more clear that we end the fossil fuel era or the fossil fuel era ends us.
You know, it's one thing to try and make a statement for your cause, but why do these people have to take out their unhinged eco-anxieties on our cultural heritage sites? I'm old enough to remember the good old days, when doomsday cultists just stood on street corners, harmlessly spouting garbled nonsense.
The end is near! We are all gonna die!
But these days, we have nutters blocking ambulances and strapping themselves to the top of bridges and shit. But to do this on the day before the day of the summer solstice, and when people and tourists have travelled miles and miles to celebrate the beauty of the iconic stones and one of the 7 wonders of the world which have stood here for 5,000 years or so, is just flat out malicious. And this Neve person knows this because she smugly says as much in her video. Honestly, I can't tell if this is the soyest of all soy boys, or just some kind of non-binary fairy girl thing. And why is it left to a small Japanese lady tourist to try and go John Wick on these fools? Where's the security, bro? Or at least some bloody Englishmen to protect their precious heritage sites. The fact a bloody foreigner seem to care more about preserving our own culture just basically sums up the state of this country these days. Anyway, at least the nation's main leaders promptly came out to condemn the senseless act. But how bad do you have to be to get a rise out of human cardboard cutout Sir Keir Starmer, for fuck's sake? Because he issued a statement saying Just Stop Oil are pathetic and should face the full extent of the law. And for the second time ever, I find myself in agreement with the multi-millionaire ex-lawyer who let Jimmy Savile keep nonsense around for shits and giggles. Because not only do I agree that Sir Keir's dad was indeed a tool,
My dad was a tool.
but also that enough is finally enough. And not only should these dweebs have the book thrown at them, and by book I mean the heaviest hardback copy of War and Peace preferably, but a real message needs to be sent to stop the cultural vandalism. Look, as someone who got involved in the lockdown marches against medical authoritarianism and government overreach a few years ago, I know the importance of preserving the right to protest, and I also understand that sometimes you do need to provoke and push boundaries for the elites to take heed of your plight. And whilst gluing yourself to walls of art galleries and public roads is indeed a bit of a piss take and extremely fucking annoying, it crosses a very serious line when you start attacking your own country's national heritage. And of course, going gentle on these people is exactly why only last month, 2 old fogies from the same organisation recently tried to desecrate one of the last remaining copies of the Magna Carta. a document almost as old as these two naughty wrinklies. A pair who hilariously tried to protest the government supposedly breaking the law by, checks notes, breaking the law themselves. But unlike that particular copy of the Carter, there's only one Stonehenge, and we can't let ultra-woke death cultists trash our ancient historical sites and documents, all in the name of their new climate gods. So, for me, this is a case where there needs to be a real public pilloring of these two individuals, and whilst I'm not advocating anyone turning up to their gaff and spraying it luminescent orange to see how they bloody well like it, I do think they should suffer some serious social and legal penalty for such an egregious cultural desecration. The act of defacing Stonehenge affects us all as English citizens who share ancestral roots to this land and its generational inheritance. To allow people from an activist group who represent extremist views and are actively engaging in acts of literal terrorism to simply get away lightly with all this will only mean that similar groups such as Extinction Rebellion will find no deterrence in committing similar increasingly shocking acts of their own. And I mean the cycle of escalation will only get worse if not. And fines are not enough. Community service and even prison is not enough. In my opinion, they should be hauled on live TV and made to issue a public apology to the nation, preferably in their underpants whilst being sprayed with orange gunge. Because ultimately, a slight has been made against all of us as a nation, as the heirs and descendants of an ancient legacy we were meant to preserve, and thus a public reckoning must be faced to heal the shared wounds. Similarly, the same should be done to the two scumbags who shamefully defiled and straight up mutilated the ancient 200 to 300 year old sycamore tree at Hadrian's Wall last year. Now the two suspects have been hauled into court earlier this month. An iconic and memorable figure from everything from award-winning photography to classic cinema, the tree stood as a sentinel of time and as a symbol of England's beauty and endurance. And alas, now just a symbol of what the country has seemingly become. A fallen nation now severed from its roots, and with a selfish, soulless populace who don't give a stuff about their cultural inheritance. Now, I would never be one for advocating the undemocratic and ungodly practice of debanking, but I do find it interesting how the globalist interests all seem to have no problem immediately going after the personal financial accounts of regime dissidents for simply challenging their fascistic behaviours, such as in the cases with Nigel Farage and even the trucker protesters over in Canada by the Castro Jr. government. But for some reason, the establishment seems to be pretty hesitant to use the same tactics for these groups of people, so you do have to ask yourself why that is exactly. Why do they treat them so differently if they're also truly supposedly undermining their agenda and are indeed a threat to their world order and billion-dollar industries? Which is to say, of course, that they aren't. The climate change cult is really just a lobbying group who seem to want the government to do exactly what they're already doing. That is, leading the way on disastrous green and net zero policies, only to do so quicker so that we can all suffer that little bit faster. And I suppose that's the problem with trying to just ignore this lot. They will continue to escalate their provocations until either a member of the public seriously loses their patience, or they really go too far and end up hurting people over their endless zealotry. I mean, remember when that ultra-based AF guy straight up snapped and shot one of these glue sniffers in the middle of the street last year? Ideally, we don't really want to get to that point, but in all honesty, the most surprising thing about that incident to me was how many people worldwide have shown so much restraint in not doing the same as him, possessing a level of tolerance which to this point has been rather admirable, though admittedly not particularly useful when it comes to disincentivising these activists who just won't stop intensifying their methods. Ultimately, this was an act which signified to me a real sickness in the nation. They can't even leave symbols of ancient English heritage out of their lust for violence, because they have no respect for English cultural icons, and thus no respect for our nation itself. It's a physical manifestation of an attack on our history, along with the cultural attacks going on elsewhere in society on our language, media and education systems. And at the end of the day, all I can say is, if climate change is truly going to end us all, then it will technically also end Just Stop Oil and all those other nutjob communist groups. So I for one totally welcome our toasty demise, and maybe I'll even leave my lights on all night tonight to speed it up a bit, and hopefully get us all a little bit closer to the supposed Armageddon just that little bit quicker.